Let me tell you a real story, not something dramatic, not something exaggerated, not something designed to shock you for attention, just a quiet, ordinary story that slowly destroyed two people who genuinely believed that love would protect them from everything life could throw at them. It began the same way most marriages begin, with excitement, with certainty, with promises that felt permanent in the moment they were spoken. They believed marriage would make life safer. They believed that once they committed to each other, confusion would disappear. They believed love would finally settle into something calm, stable, and predictable. They thought marriage was the finish line. They thought the hardest part was already behind them. It wasn't. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Everything looked normal, even healthy. They laughed together. They shared inside jokes. They planned their future in detail. They talked about where they would live. They talked about how they would grow old. They talked about the kind of life they wanted to build together. They told themselves that small disagreements were normal, that misunderstandings happen in every relationship, that learning to adjust is simply part of commitment. And in the beginning, that belief felt true, but slowly, something began to change. Not loudly, not violently, not in a way that could easily be pointed out or explained. It changed quietly. The way they looked at each other softened, then slowly cooled. Conversations became shorter. Silences became longer. The warmth that once existed between words quietly disappeared. The feeling of being understood began to fade. He started to feel like everything he did was being measured. Every word he spoke felt examined. Every decision felt questioned. Every mistake felt remembered. He wasn't trying to control anything. He wasn't trying to dominate. He wasn't even trying to win arguments. He was explaining himself, constantly, explaining his intentions, explaining his tone, explaining what he meant instead of what was heard, explaining why he reacted the way he did. Over time, that constant explaining began to exhaust him. She, on the other hand, started to feel unseen, like her emotions were inconvenient, like her feelings always arrived at the wrong time, like her needs were always postponed for later. She wasn't asking for perfection. She wasn't demanding constant attention. She wasn't asking for too much. She was asking to be emotionally felt. She was asking for presence, and that presence slowly disappeared. Neither of them felt evil. Neither of them felt like a bad person. Neither of them believed they were intentionally hurting the other, yet both of them felt deeply alone. This is where most marriage stories actually begin to break. Not with infidelity, not with violence, not with obvious betrayal, but with emotional distance that grows unnoticed. They both believed patience would fix it. They believed time would soften the tension. They believed love would eventually return on its own if they just waited long enough. They believed endurance was maturity. They believed silence was strength. They believed holding things in was the responsible thing to do. They were wrong, because marriage doesn't destroy people suddenly. It doesn't collapse in one dramatic moment. It erodes them slowly. It erodes them through unmet expectations, through unspoken disappointments, through resentment that builds when feelings are never truly expressed. It erodes them through pretending everything is fine when it isn't, through smiling when something feels wrong, through avoiding difficult conversations in the name of peace. And the most dangerous part of all, both of them thought this was normal. They told themselves, this is just how marriage is. They told themselves, this is what commitment feels like. They told themselves, this is what adulthood looks like. They assumed emotional numbness was maturity. They assumed distance was stability. They assumed silence was peace. That's when fear quietly set in. Not fear of divorce, not fear of social judgment, not fear of failure, but fear of spending decades feeling misunderstood. Fear of waking up next to someone who feels emotionally distant. Fear of realizing that commitment doesn't guarantee connection. Fear of discovering that love alone isn't enough to keep two people emotionally alive. And that fear didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, day after day, conversation after conversation, silence after silence. By the time they noticed it, it already felt too late. What made everything worse was not the distance itself, but the fact that neither of them knew how to talk about it. Every attempt to communicate felt risky. Every conversation felt like it could turn into something painful. When he tried to explain himself, it sounded defensive, not because he wanted to defend his ego, but because he he was afraid of being misunderstood again. He chose his words carefully. He monitored his tone. He filtered his thoughts before speaking. And yet, somehow, it never landed the way he hoped. When she tried to express her feelings, it sounded emotional, not because she wanted conflict, but because she had been holding things in for too long. Her voice carried frustration. Her words carried exhaustion. Her silence carried disappointment. They weren't speaking different languages. They were speaking from different fears. He feared being controlled. He feared losing himself. He feared becoming someone who had to ask permission to exist. She feared being ignored. She feared being emotionally abandoned. She feared becoming invisible in her own marriage. So both of them started protecting themselves. He protected himself by withdrawing, by becoming quieter, by sharing less, by keeping more inside. She protected herself by reacting, by pushing harder, by expressing louder, by demanding clarity where silence existed. And protection slowly replaced intimacy. The marriage didn't feel unsafe. It felt tense. It didn't feel hostile. It felt heavy. Every small interaction carried weight. Every look carried meaning. Every pause felt loaded. Small moments became emotional landmines. A delayed reply felt like disrespect. A tired expression felt like indifference. A quiet evening felt like rejection. They were no longer reacting to the present moment. They were reacting to accumulated pain. This is how resentment forms, not through one big betrayal, but through thousands of moments where someone feels unseen. Resentment doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly. It hides behind politeness. It hides behind patience. It hides behind, "I'm fine." And over time, it changes how people see each other. They stayed together physically. They shared the same bed. They shared the same home. They shared the same routine. But emotionally, they lived separate lives. He felt like he was losing himself. He didn't recognize the quiet version of who he had become. He missed the part of himself that felt relaxed, spontaneous, alive. She felt like she was losing the relationship. She missed feeling chosen. She missed feeling prioritized. She missed feeling emotionally close. Both losses were real. Both were painful. This is why many marriages don't explode. They fade. There's no dramatic ending, no final argument, no clear villain, just a slow realization. People wake up one day and say, "I don't know when we became strangers." But the truth is, it didn't happen in one day. It happened over years, through small compromises that went unnoticed, through conversations that never happened, through feelings that were never named. Marriage has a way of exposing unresolved wounds. It magnifies childhood patterns. It brings buried fears to the surface. If someone grew up feeling unheard, marriage will test that wound. If someone grew up feeling controlled, marriage will challenge that fear. And if those fears are never addressed, they begin controlling the relationship. This is the part no one prepares you for. Marriage doesn't fix emotional gaps. It highlights them. Marriage doesn't heal insecurity. It reveals it. Marriage doesn't create emotional safety. It demands it. Most people don't marry the wrong person. They marry without understanding themselves. They enter marriage believing love will carry them through, believing commitment will compensate for self-awareness, believing time will solve what honesty avoids. But time doesn't heal what silence protects. The longer things remain unspoken, the heavier they become. Eventually, honesty feels dangerous, vulnerability feels risky, and being yourself feels like a liability. That's when marriage stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like obligation. That's when people stop growing, not because they don't want to, but because growth feels unsafe. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin shrinking themselves to keep the peace. Eventually, something inside the marriage breaks, not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that anyone outside can easily see. What breaks is the illusion that things will somehow fix themselves. The illusion that time alone heals emotional wounds. The illusion that silence equals peace. They stop expecting change. They stop hoping conversations will feel different. They stop believing tomorrow will be better than today. And when hope disappears, people don't always leave. Sometimes they stay and slowly shut down emotionally. This is where marriages become dangerous. Not abusive, not chaotic, just empty. They function, they coexist, they share responsibilities, they manage routines, they appear stable to everyone else. But inside, something essential is missing. He learns how to stay quiet, how to avoid conflict, how to survive without being fully himself. She learns how to lower her expectations, how to stop asking, how to carry disappointment silently. Both believe they are being mature. Both believe believe they are being responsible. Both believe they are doing what commitment requires, but what they are really doing is slowly abandoning themselves. This is the cost no one talks about. Marriage doesn't just ask for compromise, it asks for emotional courage. It asks you to stay honest, even when honesty feels risky. It asks you to stay vulnerable, even when vulnerability feels unsafe. And when courage is replaced by fear, marriage becomes a place where growth stops. People think divorce is the failure, but often the real failure happens long before that. It happens when honesty feels dangerous, when expressing needs feels selfish, when being yourself feels like a liability. That's when love stops feeling like freedom and starts feeling like obligation. This story doesn't end with hatred. It doesn't end with betrayal. It doesn't end with a dramatic exit. It ends with a realization that love alone isn't enough if emotional honesty disappears. That commitment doesn't protect you from loneliness. That promises don't guarantee understanding. Marriage magnifies who you already are. If you don't know yourself, it will expose that. If you don't face your fears, it will trap you inside them. This isn't a warning against marriage. It's a warning against entering it blindly. So before you marry, before you promise forever, before you tie your life to someone else, ask yourself one honest question. Are you choosing marriage because you're emotionally ready to grow with someone, or because you're afraid of being alone?